So, Sego, Gakurisana Skakwa Gayaje, Ogwayo Sida, Niwaga Sede, on the Gega, Gale, Ganikahaka, Niwaga Wanjadan, Carrie Gayaje, Carrie Gats, Carrie Dishnakas, Makwa and Dodam, Okwamoekwe, Minwa, on the Gega and Dam, Minwa, Ganikahaka and Dam, Minwa, Jagadash and Dam, Minwa, Toronto and Jabad. So, my name is Carrie Lester. I'm from Toronto. My mother and her family, through her matrilineal line, are from Six Nations, Grand River Territory. The words I used just now to express who I am were done in sort of 3 different languages. The first was in the Onondaga language, then there was some Oneida, and then there was a Aamjiwnaang. And the words I used to describe my name, it was not a true spirit name, it was a nickname given to me at an Onondaga language school I attended a few years ago at Six Nations. And it was a name that says, She Who Skips. And it was given to me because of, in the language school that particular week, people were coming and going during the day, and as people were going through, I was trying to remember what I had to say, and I would count, okay, how many people were ahead of me, and I'd be ready, okay, 5 people, 4 people, now it's my turn, I'd jump in and say my thing, but somebody else had either come in or left, and I was always in the wrong spot. So they gave me the name Skip. Yeah, she's always skipping in ahead of herself. And so some of the other words I used were describing my clan, and I don't know my clan, but I use words to use in place of them. For, in the Onondaga language, I use the phrase of a barefoot Onondaga, because I'm through my patrilineal line, through my grandmother, we're a barefoot Onondaga. So there is no clan barefoot, but I use those words in there to describe the clan so I could remember how to say the word clan. And in the Aamjiwnaang language, I use Bear Clan as, in our language classes, just for the class sake, we are adopted into the Bear Clan for the sake of the class. So I keep those words until I know what my true clan is. And this is Sigrid.
Yeah, I am Sigrid, and I'm Mohawk from Six Nations, and my father was from Sweden. We're here tonight because our Mohawk class was canceled, or else we. That's why. Yeah. Or else we wouldn't be here. So our teacher's not feeling well, so we're here. And so it's good. It worked out. It's nice to see everybody here and such dedicated people. When I look in the room, I see people that have worked really hard on Line 9. So. Not wait for that, for sure.
Yeah. And so we're going to sing a song. It's known as the Mother Earth song. It's done in the Mohawk Ganikahaka language. It's a song we've only just learned this year, so we're a little rusty, but we'll do our best. Okay? Okay.
Yeti So I just want to take a minute to think about and acknowledge the relatives of this land here. I really want to appreciate Dakota and Myeengun and our singers for welcoming the spirits and calling them in to come and be with us. Because, you know, in our tradition, you know, when we organize, it's not just about organizing, it's not just about protecting the land, but it's about enacting who we are. And a part of that is our spirituality, right, if I could put it that way, or our cosmology. But just acknowledging that our relatives are here with us, and that's a really important thing, so thank you very much for doing that. So my name is Heather Milton-Lightening. I'm Cree Stony Blackfoot and Ojibwe. I'm from Treaty 4, which is Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, the southern chunk. I'm the co-director of the Indigenous Tar Sands campaign, so we've been doing support work to communities in northern Alberta and all over the place since about 2007. But our job is just to support, right? And so that's kind of why we've taken a few steps back. So tonight we really want to talk about Line 9, right? And we want to think about Alberta and what's going on there. And for those of you I hope are familiar, it's the largest human development project on Earth, the tar sands extraction. It's the companies that have made the most money in the history of money that has existed are making money off this land. And that territory belongs to Cree and Dene people, and of course Métis people and landowners, and all of those different folks in northern Alberta. And so one of the strategies that we found has been really effective in fighting the tar sands and this unsustainable development is really Indigenous rights, right? And it's on all of its different forms. And so we're going to talk about Indigenous rights, but we're also going to talk about land defense tonight and about the struggle against Line 9 and why it's important to make the links with Alberta. As you may know, since it's the biggest development project, we're talking about multitudes of pipelines. The mother of all pipelines, Grand Rapids Pipeline, Enbridge, TransCanada, all of these different companies. Every major oil company on earth is invested in tar sands. Every banking, financial institution, pension fund, every angle of this is invested in this project, right? And who pays the price for it? It's Cree and Dene people of the north in Alberta, which the government doesn't want to acknowledge, right? They did a cancer study a few years ago, and they said, well, there's a 30% increase in cancers in northern Alberta, in particular in the community of Fort Chippewas, which is 1,200 people. But they used data from 10 years ago, outdated data. They never gathered anything new. They never did any tests. They never did any of that stuff. And so, you know, part of this has really been activating the tar sands movement globally. And we've had actions in places like the UK, at the climate negotiations. You know, there's an action this weekend, Toast to Coast, that happened in the West Coast with a bunch of celebrities. You know, those are the kinds of things that we're starting to see, is that people are activating all over Canada, all over the US, and we're part of a larger global movement that is questioning the unsustainability of the way that we live our lives, right? And I think Indigenous people, particularly in Canada, these are our homelands. This is where we come from. Our creation stories start here, right? And, you know, we agreed to share the land, whether or not that was through wampum belts, through treaties, through different agreements with these new people that came in. But unfortunately, that's been a very unreciprocal relationship. And we've been using these tools to fight back unsustainable development, to stop the Canadian government from just going full tilt, right? And I'm sure you're familiar with Bill C-48 and 3035 and the rise of Idle No More. But those bills were created by the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, right? And so what that did is to open the doorways to make it easier for companies to do development projects in Canada, whether or not that's the tar sands or opening up the Peel watershed and the Northwest Territories, whatever that looks like. We're saying to the rest of the world, we have a great economy to develop in. We survived the last recession. That's what they're telling the globe. But we're here as small community members and land defenders to remind the rest of the world that this is not a place for unfettered development, that we also have a responsibility not only as recognizing our ancestors and what they fought for so that we could be here, but understanding that there's links between us and what happens in Guatemala, and these oil companies and the development that they're doing in Nigeria and other countries, that we have a unified front globally that's fighting these development projects. And we've seen the tar sands movement grow across the globe. And I think one of the most effective tools that we've been able to use as Indigenous people is telling our story. And you know, for us, the story is a really powerful construct. Because it's not just about, I'm going to tell you a mythical story, but it's our oral history, it's our tradition, it's our way of teaching our young folks how to be good humans, how to be good relatives. And so we want to share some of those stories with you about struggle tonight. But we also want to remind ourselves of our responsibility, not just as Indigenous people, but all of us that live here in Turtle Island. Our responsibility to help the land and to take care of it. And so I'm really excited that y'all are here to listen. It's a little bit hot. I'm from a dry climate, so I'm kind of sweating, but we'll get over that. So we have some really awesome presenters tonight, and just wanted to thank Rising Tide folks. If you put up your hand. I know you're shy, whatever. So they organized this event, they're really, really committed to doing solidarity with Indigenous communities. And I think that's really been a critical thing that's helped us. There have been calls from the Onestoten camp to do actions on Chevron. There's been a multitude of different local community events that have happened in Toronto because groups like Rising Tide exist. And that's really important strategy when people are out on the land and in situations like blockades and camps and other things that are going on, that we have a relationship when we fight back in these large urban centers and we target, you know, the governments, these corporations, the banks, and so on. And so, you know, Rising Tide has always played a critical role in trying to understand how to be good allies, how to do good solidarity. And so I really want to thank them for providing this panel and doing support work for Chippewas of the Thames. So with that, I think we're going to start with our first panelist, which is Lindsay Gray. She told me to tell everyone that she's awesome, and she is. So if you don't know Lindsay, she's been organizing with this group called ASAP, which I'm sure she'll talk about, since 2012. She's a youth organizer and been doing amazing work. Aamjiwnaang is a community located at the very southern part of this pipeline, so Sarnia, Chemical Valley. Of course, Lindsay can go into greater detail about what that's like to be from Chemical Valley, what it's like to fight all these different companies and petrochemical companies, right? She's an Anishinaabe Kwe and a land defender. And with further ado, I'm going to welcome Lindsay.
Bonjour, Lindsay Gray, Indigenous, Makwan, Dodam, Aamjiwnaang, Donjaba, Anishinaabe. So again, while we introduce ourselves, and not only in our language, and to the language you might know, English, is to bring the spirits closer so that not only you're listening, but the spirits are too, and to welcome them into the space. So what I said was, hi, hello, my name is Lindsay Gray, I'm Bear Clan. I'm from Aamjiwnaang and I am Anishinaabe. So I'm here to talk about Aamjiwnaang and the work that's been done there so far, and about Line 9, I guess. So I'll start with Aamjiwnaang. Aamjiwnaang is a 2,700 acre land reserve, so it's not that big. It's about like 5 kilometers by 5 kilometers. And it is completely surrounded by industry. It has 63 industrial facilities in a 25-kilometer radius. And about 25% of the polluters are within 5% of the community. So we are very, very polluted in Aamjiwnaang. And what I like to say about Aamjiwnaang a lot of the time is everything is polluted. And what I mean by that is the soil is polluted. Some years we're told not to plant gardens because the soil is too polluted with mercury or VOCs, and we can't stir those up, or we might digest them if we grow our plants. And The air is very polluted, as you could probably tell if there's 63 facilities. But the air usually smells different wherever you go in Aamjiwnaang. So whether you're driving into Aamjiwnaang from Sarnia, you have within a whole bunch of companies that you're driving through, like Styrolution, Lanxess, usually drive by Shell, and these are all big company names, and they're all very centered around Aamjiwnaang. And so when you're driving past these, they're all doing different things, whether they are making petrochemicals, or they're like Lanxess makes plastic that's within tires that you use on your car, or bubble gum. So it's very widespread on what they use. And so it can smell very different where you're driving. So it can smell like eggs. And if it smells like eggs, then you know they're releasing sulfur. And it could smell like burning tires because they did something wrong at Lanxess and they're trying to burn off their plastic or something. But either way, it always has a smell to it that people who come to Aamjiwnaang realize that, and it kind of hurts their nose. To us, we're used to it. We're very, very used to it. We're known to have dulled senses where smelling stuff is different to us than it would be to anyone else, kind of thing. So yeah, what we call it is the Sarnia nose, and it's been scientifically proven that we have dull nose senses. And the water is very, very polluted in Aamjiwnaang. We actually have signs within Aamjiwnaang around our creeks and streams and man-made ponds like Inkajig that say caution, do not touch the water, it may cause serious illness. And sadly, that is true. We have tested the waters a few times, not just Aamjiwnaang industry also has to test it, but it's legally to them. They don't have to at all share the results. They can give report backs that they write up, and they can choose what they want to put in those reports. So their studies can be whether inconclusive to us kind of thing, or they might not say the entire thing. So it's really hard for us to know exactly what's in the water at what time kind of thing. So we know there is mercury sediment within the waters. In Inkajig, there is a lot of mercury in there, so we don't usually fish there. And in the Sinclair River, which connects us to the US, so Michigan is right there, and then we have Ontario here, and the Sinclair River. There are old dock poles, like you can see big wooden poles sticking out of the water, and they won't remove those because if they do, they stir up old mercury sediment, and that can lead to illness. So they just leave them in there, and they just leave the mercury there. Another thing I like to mention is that the people are very polluted in Aamjiwnaang. We have been tested a few times, and we've found out that we have mercury within our hair, and we have banned PCBs in our blood. And PCBs have been illegal in Canada for quite some time now, but we're now finding it within our blood. And we also have these things called genetic chemicals, where whatever my grandparents were exposed to, I am now carrying them because they're being passed down from generation to generation. And we're also seeing a lot of effects with just people growing up in Aamjiwnaang. We have this skewed birth ratio of 2 girls for every boy. And it made big news when we found that out. They started releasing articles calling it the Lost Boys of Aamjiwnaang, because we don't have as many boys now of ratio, and this is the first time in the world that has ever seen a place where it's this drastic of a loss of men in a community. And there's also a really big ratio. It's 39% women have miscarriages, and that's because of the pollution. And so we also have a death ratio of, we're supposed to die at around 50. So we were also told that in our community, that you're only going to live till 50. And you see it a lot in Aamjiwnaang, of losing family and relatives, and people that are quite young. Like, I went to go visit my cousin, who I lost, I guess, from Chemical Valley because they had cancer, and I just figured out now that I'm older than them. So we're losing people, whether they're young or old, to illnesses because of pollution. And so about 40% of Canada's petrochemical industry is manufactured in the radius of Aamjiwnaang. So that is a lot to be like produced in one area. And the reason for that being is we are kind of like industry's empire, since we're on the border of Michigan and Ontario. They have a lot of ways they can access and reproduce whatever they need to. So we have pipelines, we have trains, we have tankers, so there's a really, really ginormous ships on the water. And they use all their resources and what they can to export oil or whatever they need to. So we have the threat of industry, which is a very big threat. They're not very safe when it comes to their ways of producing. So workers joke around that after 9/11, they had to up their security, so they would have to check lunch boxes of industry, of workers. And so the workers would say, like, we don't need to bring the explosive into these facilities because they're already so dangerous they could blow up themselves. And that's another threat we have is when blackouts or stuff happen, we need to have our electricity on as soon as possible because we're in danger without it. But there's always the constant threat of every day of a spill happening, and spills happen constantly. They're not something that happens like once a month, they happen almost once a week. And a lot of times they won't tell us if they spill. Like if they are releasing something, you can usually tell by flares, and flares are giant towers with fire on top of them. And if they're over 5 meters, then they are considered a spill. And so a lot of times you'll drive by and you'll see that they're way bigger than they should be, but it's not being reported as a spill. And so an incident happened with that where they didn't report it, but there was a giant flare, and it caused our daycare children to get very, very ill. And they didn't know what was wrong with them. They couldn't tell them or anything, so the parents would pick them up after daycare and then take them right to the emergency. And the emergency just came up with all of them have some sort of flu because their symptoms were different, but they couldn't tell what they were. And industry is supposed to report when they have a spill of what they spilled so that they can tell the hospital, so that they can tell the kids what, or so that they can tell people what's actually happening. So the kids got diagnosed wrongfully, and then after that, industry came out and said, oh yeah, we spilled, like no big deal, kind of thing. And so these companies are ruthless in what they are doing because as I'm talking, like you can hear all these incidents of we're losing population with miscarriages or just men not being born and just an overcapacity of women, and how they're not being safely regulated. Like they're not telling us about these spills. And it's really hard living in Aamjiwnaang because we always have these sirens and cameras that are always around. So when a siren goes off, sirens actually go off every Monday at 12 o'clock. And so if they don't go off Monday at 12 o'clock, then you know something's wrong because they're going off at another time. And so you have to memorize what the sirens mean. So the sirens could mean that either it's not that bad of a spill and you have to go within doors, close all the windows, like plug up all your air conditioning holes and make sure no air is getting within the house. Or if you're outside, you have to watch for these yellow cones that are along their fence lines and to get away from that wind direction. Or they could be so bad that you need to be evacuated. And I have been evacuated out of my home a few times in my life. So again, these companies are so ruthless in what they are doing, and there's so many in the radius of my community, and it's really a struggle for our day-to-day because I even like moved away to Toronto for a year, and then coming back to Aamjiwnaang, it was hard for me to like get back into that of breathing that air again. And that's just our normal lives. Our air always stinks. Those facilities are always running, so there's always that low buzz that you can hear of the machinery going. So it's constant pollution of air. You're hearing it constantly because they run 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And we also have, like I said, the struggle of they're producing, they're exporting. So we have line 9 finished, like it ends in Aamjiwnaang. So since they want to reverse it, they want to start producing more. And it's actually going to be exported to the States and then further on. So Chemical Valley is now getting ready for that. They're getting ready for line 9 to come online. And they are building more facilities, they're building more things, they're adding on to Chemical Valley, which is becoming more of a struggle to Aamjiwnaang. And this is something I like to remind people that when they support oil and they support this, they're also supporting the struggle of Indigenous communities, communities like mine, where I can't breathe normal air every day, where they're supporting, and they don't know this, that they're supporting communities within Alberta where they're getting cancer instead of money for these projects. And these issues are being ignored. And Indigenous voices are getting harder and harder to speak up and speak about these issues. And yeah, I guess that's what I wanted to say about Aamjiwnaang and Line 9. So Aamjiwnaang has been, we have a group called ASAP, and it's Aamjiwnaang and Sarnia Against Pipelines. And we have been organizing to create awareness like this, where we come out and speak to events about Aamjiwnaang and the effects of Line 9. And we've also been organizing within Aamjiwnaang itself. Right now we are trying to do a project of testing our water, because like I said, they don't test it, or if they do, they don't have to show us results. So we're trying to do it ourselves, of creating a community where we're either getting community members to test it and having that power of them knowing how to test water or how to remediate it. And also having the whole community be updated on these things, because we're not usually updated. And we also have something that's coming up called a toxic tour, where we have people come live a day of our reality. So we invite people to come September 4th and 5th. 4th is the opening feast, and the 5th is the walk. So we take you through a bit of Chemical Valley, because if you guys were to walk the entire thing, it would take like a day. So we only take you through a bit of it, and that's enough for you to breathe that air once a day, to hear those facilities, and hopefully there's no spills, because I have to experience that. But just to experience that lived reality of everything around you being polluted, and because it's for the production of oil.
Some of these stories are hard to hear, right? So I just want to acknowledge that. But that's the reality of what it's like to live at ground zero of these projects, right? And so just take that in. You know, we want to acknowledge that sometimes it's hard to listen, it's hard to hear. But that's also a really good thing, because that can be really motivating. But it also is like, it's an emotional way to connect together as human people, right? And I think that's the reason why this tar sands movement has been so effective, because it's people from these communities that are speaking out, and they're telling their stories, and it really hits people in a place that's really deep, and it makes them want to organize, makes them want to do stuff, it makes them want to fight back, right? It makes them want to think critically about the world around them. And that's really important, you know, because sometimes we look out in the world and into the school systems and education and all these things, and it doesn't teach us how to think critically about the world around us. And so that's a really important thing. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Our next speaker is Elliot. also known as the real Missy Elliot. Missy's here with her dad and her brother, and really, really admire Melissa. She's done a lot of amazing youth organizing. She's someone who's really committed to the work that she does, and she recently finished a language program, who's learning how to speak her language, and I think that's a really amazing thing. Because a lot of the struggle is about retaining our way of life, right? And our language is the way to do that. So, Missy has been involved in doing work with 6 Nations of the Grand River, and they did a construction demonstration near Brantford and shut down Line 9 in 2014. But I'm sure Missy can introduce herself and talk about the work that they're doing, and she's really amazing, and I'm really glad she's here. So without further ado.
Sego, Sewagwego, Watquat Nuerlado, Wagatsanuni Chika, Idowes, Daskulo Niwago Manjodo, that no Gadewiansta Neganigeha, that no Kelihanianis, Nela Dixa Ago, Neganigeha Oni. That no Gary Wayak Sony, that no Gatsununiji Nigajerha. So, hello everybody. My Ungohoy name is Ojisto Kuyo, but everyone calls me Missy. Well, here, the English people. Back home, people who speak call me Ojisto Kuyo. But anyway, so I'm Tuscarora. And I'm from 6 Nations, and I'm also a Mohawk language student, and I also am a teacher. I teach kids, I teach in the immersion schools, I also teach in daycare, I teach a language, and that's like part of my own like fighting. Like that's also part of this movement, which is bringing back our ways and our language, which was taken from us in the residential schools and taken from us for all this processes that's been going on. I can't study my own language, Tuscarora. There's only 2 speakers left, or maybe 3, I think. And they're very old now, and they're trying to scramble to fight to save that language in the States right now using Ganigeha methods. So a lot of people that are Tuscarora are learning Ganigeha and using that method to, and putting Tuscarora in there and trying to save it. And that's what we find with a lot of our languages right now, what's going on. And we can talk about our austerity as well, and the lack of funding and all that kind of stuff. This is all happening in our territories. There's so much we could talk about, so much going on that we're fighting, and people are fighting on a daily basis to struggle and survive as Ungohoe people. But I'm also standing here as a mother and a woman, Ungohoe woman, and that's how I situate myself, being here as my responsibility to be here and do whatever I can in my own capacity to keep protecting the land and fulfilling those roles from what I was taught, our roles as women and as mothers and as humans and Ungohoe people. So what I've really learned and what I've been taught is through doing a lot of this language work, it's kind of been like an eye-opening experience, and I know some of these women who are taking Mohawk right now are shaking their heads, is that really like our languages and our culture are the foundation, I think, a lot for myself of doing this work, and I could see the ties of it between what's going on with our land and what's going on with our culture and our languages. When I started learning the language, it's a whole different way of thinking. You can't talk about the trees, and you literally can't talk about anything living without using words to describe what it's doing. To describe, they're living things in our languages. And there's a totally different mindset when you speak our language than when you speak English. And what it shows me with our ceremonies as Haudenosaunee people, we go by the seasons and what's happening. So the next ceremony we're having is strawberry ceremony. The strawberries have just come out. And what the connection I want to make in your minds right now is that our culture and our language is very much tied to the land. And this eco-genocide that's going on, this raping of the land that's going on, this in so many different ways, that is very much tied to the cultural genocide. that's happening, that has been happening to our people for centuries, and the actual genocide, whatever you want to say. But really that's what's happening, because without the land goes our culture. And if we don't have those strawberries coming out, if we don't have the maples running, if we don't have all those stuff going on, we don't have the ceremonies to go along with it. And so when I think about fishing, which is our tradition, when we think about hunting, when we think about gardening, which we have very traditional methods of doing that, of growing the corns, the Three Sisters, all of those things that I'm learning right now. If we allow this stuff to happen, if we allow it and we stand by and we keep going with our everyday lives, and I see that even happening with my own traditional people at home. It's hard, you know, but if we just ignore it almost, then we're being complacent, and the what's happening is these connections between these two, with the dying of the land, and with this destruction of the land comes the dying of our people as well. We're very much connected, and so that's what I wanted to bring out to you guys, is that this is a life and death situation for our people physically, as you can tell, and also in our heritage and who we are. And it's to me, it's not really a choice to be doing this. Because if I want a reality, if I want something to exist for my daughter, I have to be doing stuff like this. And I have to be creating a space, having something left for her. Because I want her to actually be able to go pick the berries and eat them and then go to ceremony. And to be able to plant and then go to harvest ceremony. All of those kind of things, that's what I want in the future. But the future that we're looking at, what does that entail? Really think about it. And one other thing I just wanted to say really quick. If what's going on with Aamjiwnaang was happening with a non-native community, with a white community, would that actually be happening? Wouldn't that be in the news? Wouldn't we all know about that? Yeah, we would. It's completely mind-blowing. And that happens all the time. Nobody knows what's going on in our community. It's like a media blackout on what's going on and what these people are doing to our communities. And it's so important, events like this, to get the word out, because it is a blackout, because people don't want to know what's going on. And that's why the companies are allowed to do it. It doesn't matter, because it's just an Indian. And so with the Line 9 and the tar sands, my journey began into this when I actually went to the tar sands, I would say. And I went there with a healing walk, and I went there with Vanessa. We went on the healing walk that they had there, and we've seen, like, I have friends like in Alberta and Fort McMurray, and I've heard about it a lot, but when we went out there, it was insanity. And you can't really fully understand it until you actually see what's going on there. Like, literally, where there's forest, now desert. And I was pregnant at the time with my daughter, and I couldn't walk it. And I had to ride in the car with the elders. It was literally like choking. And I remember sitting outside with, we were having a fire, and there was a bunch of people that lived there. And I was talking with them about what was going on there. And they were telling me that they can't fish anymore. They can't hunt, it's not safe to do that. And I again was picturing it for my daughter, if she and future generations, her kid, if they weren't able to do that, that's ripping our culture away from us. It's ripping it away. They're ripping it away. Like, that's their culture, to be able to do that. And what we've done for centuries, and they're ripping it away. They can't do it anymore. It's not safe. And to eat that, to be self-sustainable. And so what it realized to me was that it's like a spider web that they're creating with these pipelines. And now it's coming, and now it's come out here. And a lot of the focus was out west, and with Line 9, it's come out here. And this was what I seen as an opportunity to help my friends out there, and by stopping this, and by doing everything that I could, because I couldn't believe what was actually happening there. And so we did stuff with the National Energy Board, and I'm pretty sure you can talk about more of that, but I went to the National Energy Board hearings when they first was talking about it, and I went with my past Aunt Ruby. And yeah, glad you guys remember her. And and the fact that their structures that and their processes, it is designed to cut us out as Ungahoi people. And we were left standing there shouting at them, you know what I mean? Going in there and having to force our voice. And that's always the case of what happens in these structures. And so now, you guys, that's what you guys are doing, and is bringing that back to them. But that's, you know, we've gone to the Energy Board, National Energy Board in the past, and I mean, they always are cutting out the Ungahoi people and making it very, very, very difficult even to get our voices heard, even within that process that's supposed to be inclusive of everybody. And as well with Swamp Line 9 happened in Brantford, north of Brantford, we shut that down as well last year. And with that, what I seen when we did that, we had community meetings come to about what was going on with Line 9. And what I've seen when we went there and we shut it down was, yeah, which was good, yeah, it was very good, was that the collective power, there wasn't very many of us, and we went there and we did it. And so the power of our Ungahoi people and the power that we collectively have all here, and the power that we had when there was non-Native allies and we came together and we did that action, which was very successful at the time. But what happened after that, and I'll only go into it very slightly because I know I don't have very much time and I want to get into a couple other things, but we were going off of a thing saying that they had no consultation, they weren't consulting our people. However, I did go to the Haudenosaunee Development Institute and talk to our chiefs there, and they said that they were in some sort of talks with Enbridge about something else. And so we talked to them and we said, well, why aren't you talking about this, about Line 9? And so there was some confusion. And I feel like this is a tactic that they're using in my community. They went to band council, and maybe I'll explain that really quickly. In Six Nations, the way that our community is, that people don't know, might not know, that aren't familiar with Six Nations, we have a band elected council, and we have a traditional confederacy council, which has existed for hundreds and hundreds of years, 1,000 years, it's debatable. And we have these two governing bodies. And in 1924, the band council was enforced on our people by the RCMP, things like that. And so that's the history of band council within our community. And right now, what the companies in Canada is using that against us, because the Confederacy never went away. And the band council is still there. And people support the band council. And people support Confederacy Council, and they're using those factions against us. And so some people are going to the band council, and some people are, and then the Confederacy is saying, well, why aren't you coming to us when we're the one that holds the treaties? And then some people go to Confederacy Council, and then the band council like, why aren't you going to us? And they're going back and forth, and these companies are using these factions against us, very much so. And I feel like that's the case that happened with our chiefs. I'm not sure what's going on right now, I won't comment on it. But I feel like there was a blind being put over by Enbridge. They tried to go to band council first. Band council wasn't having it. And you go to Confederacy chiefs, they didn't talk about Line 9. They talked about something else, and so they were distracting them. And right now, I'm not sure exactly what's going on with that. And so I feel like these people have a lot of money, they study our people, and they know what to do. And they're using these factions against us, and I feel like that's a weak point, and that's where it's very important for us to do the work back home for education. And that's what we've been doing, is we've been doing community forums and education sessions. We did an education session with our clan mothers and chiefs, and we also did a community presentation as well. And like those are really important to educating our own people, because we go to all of our territories, and this Line 9 is going through many Haudenosaunee territories, and going to be affecting many Haudenosaunee territories, but none of our territories know about it. And so that education is extremely important. And what is affecting, what we have that is affecting this and is being completely ignored is the Haldimand Proclamation in this area, which is 6 miles on either side of the Grand River, and then and the Grand River, that's down there that way, it's not Toronto. But and then we have also the Nanfan Treaty, which is our rights for hunting and fishing. We also have the Truro Wampum, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. It's right over there, and the Silver Covenant Chain as well. And those are the main treaties that we can use, and we have used in many of these cases with companies, but these are a lot of the weapons that we have. And however, a lot of these things like the Covenant Chain, the Truro, have been broken and are being completely ignored and constantly broken. But what I will say is, to wrap it up right now, is that like, although the government is doing that and companies are breaking this, this is something that, a tool that can be used by everyone here, the Truro and the Silver Covenant Chain. Because what I hear from that's coming from right here is like the Silver Covenant Chain, which is, we have us on one side and you guys on, and it's supposed to be the Canadian government, British government, and we made it with other people on the other side. And we have this chain linking us. And when we shake it, when we have a problem, you can feel it and come to our aid in the same way, right? And I feel that that's what's happening with all of our communities. We're calling for help, and you guys can respond. And we can have that relationship with each other of helping each other in times of need. And it's very much a time of need right now. And so we can be helping each other in that way. And the Truro, like what I'll say about the Truro is a lot of people misconstrue the Truro and misuse it. There's a lot of different interpretations of what the Truro means. The Truro is it's a thing that was used long before not any white people came here. And it was used as like the relationship between man and woman walking side by side. But we used it with a lot of other nations as well. And this is something that we can use in our relationships with each other. And what it basically talks about is like our peace, respect, and friendship. But I've heard it also explained as using Gatnigohio, Gazat Stansura, Skana, and Oni, like having a good mind, having these are hard words to just hard words to translate. When I heard Gazat Stansura explained, it's not, some people say it's power, but it's not. It's like that personal strength, personal like pushing you forward, that personal thing that comes inside you. And Skana is that peace people say, but it's not really peace. Peace isn't peace. When people hear peace, they mean the non-existence of war, but that's not really what we mean when we say peace. Skana, we mean that feeling when you're like, you get home and you're relaxing and you're like feeling like at the end of a hard day, you're just like, Skana. Like, that's like, that's Skana, right? And Gatnigohlio, the good mind, that's like the choice you make. You have you doesn't mean you think good all the time. You have a choice, right? That it's a discipline, some people say. And then Ganalunquatsu, that love. So what some people say is like there's non-interference. You don't go into one and try and steer the other. And so when we're organizing, to me what that translates to is I'm not trying to push what you're trying to do. You're not trying to push what I'm trying to do or manipulate it. I'm not trying to pull you into mine. You're not trying to pull me into yours. We're not using each other. We're standing beside each other and helping each other and are connected to each other. And sometimes this is misused and stuff, and the interpretation is a little bit skewed. but I feel like it's a good starting point if you start studying it and really thinking about what it actually means. And I feel like that's what we've been doing a lot with like Rising Tide and with like all of our communities and stuff like that, and with organizations, a lot of the people that are here and that I've seen so many other times. And so that's something that, like, those are tools that we have that we can use in between each other. And I feel like with this Line 9 stuff, it's connected us, and this whole tar sands movement, it's a worldwide thing, like Heather was saying. And we have to do this together. And regardless of our differences and where we're coming from, and our lived experiences, we have to. And we're connected to each other. And this is going to be affecting all of us. And speaking from as a woman's perspective and a mother's perspective, this is affecting our water. And as women, that's our responsibility to water. And all other areas. And working with children all the time as well. Like, we have to have a future for them, have to. And we have to be thinking, we have to be far-seeing. We can't just be thinking of what's going on right now. It's so easy in the fast-paced world. You guys are living in Toronto. When I come here, I feel like I'm in a hurry. And that's like, but you have to look past that. You have to be far-seeing into the future. That's what they told our chiefs. And we have to look at what are we giving and what are we doing into the future? Where are we going to be? And that's what I'll leave you with. Where are we going to be? We have to do something for this. And so now we'll go on. And when we shake it, when we have a problem, you can feel it and come to our aid in the same way, right? And I feel that that's what's happening with all of our communities. We're calling for help, and you guys can respond. And we can have that relationship with each other, of helping each other in times of need. And it's very much a time of need right now. And so we can be helping each other in that way. And the two-row, like what I'll say about the two-row is a lot of people misconstrue the two-row and misuse it. There's a lot of different interpretations of what the two-row means. The two-row it's a thing that was used long before not any white people came here. And it was used as like the relationship between man and woman walking side by side. But we used it with a lot of other nations as well. And this is something that we can use in our relationships with each other. And what it basically talks about is like our peace, respect, and friendship. But I've heard it also explained as using Gatnigohio, Gazat Stansura, Skana, and Kwatsura Oni, like having a good mind, having these are hard words to just hard words to translate. When I heard Gazat Stansura explained, it's not. Some people say it's power, but it's not. It's like that personal strength, personal like pushing you forward, that personal thing that comes inside you. And Skana is that peace people say, but it's not really peace. Peace isn't peace. When people hear peace, they mean the non-existence of war, but that's not really what we mean when we say peace. Skana, we mean that feeling when you're like, you get home and you're relaxing and you're like feeling like at the end of a hard day, you're just like, Skana. Like, that's like, that's Skana, right? And Gatnigohlio, the good mind, that's like the choice you make. You doesn't mean you think good all the time. You have a choice, right? That it's a discipline, some people say. And then Ganaluquatsula, love. So what some people say is like there's non-interference. You don't go into one and try and steer the other. And so when we're organizing, to me, what that translates to is I'm not trying to push what you're trying to do. You're not trying to push what I'm trying to do or manipulate it. I'm not trying to pull you into mine. You're not trying to pull me into yours. We're not using each other. We're standing beside each other and helping each other and are connected to each other. And sometimes this is misused and stuff, and the interpretation is a little bit skewed. But I feel like it's a good starting point if you start studying it and really thinking about what it actually means. And I feel like that's what we've been doing a lot with like Rising Tide and with like all of our communities and stuff like that, and with the organizations, a lot of the people that are here and that I've seen so many other times. And so that's something that, like, those are tools that we have that we can use in between each other. And I feel like with this Line 9 stuff, it's connected us, and this whole tar sands movement, it's a worldwide thing, like Heather was saying. And we have to do this together. And regardless of our differences and where we're coming from, and our lived experiences, we have to. And we're connected to each other. And this is going to be affecting all of us. And speaking from as a woman's perspective and a mother's perspective, this is affecting our water. And as women, that's our responsibility is the water. And all other areas. And working with children all the time as well. Like, we have to have a future for them, have to. And we have to be thinking, we have to be far-seeing. We can't just be thinking of what's going on right now. It's so easy in the fast-paced world. You guys are living in Toronto. When I come here, I feel like I'm in a hurry. And that's like, but you have to look past that. You have to be far-seeing into the future. That's what they told our chiefs. And we have to look at what are we giving and what are we doing into the future? Where are we going to be? And that's what I'll leave you with. Where are we going to be? We have to do something for this. And so now we'll go on.
So one of the things that we've used as a tactic, if you look at Alberta, there's been court cases that have been launched by the Athabasca Chippewas First Nation, Beaver Lake Cree Nation. You might be familiar with some of these court cases. But it's a strategy, right? We live in Canada in this construct, and there are legal constructs within that. Our treaties are, these wampum belts that we're talking about, they're bigger than that. But they're agreements, right? And so because they're internationally recognized within the UN, League of Nations, we can go on and on about that, they're what we're using to fight back, to hold the Canadian government accountable for its due diligence, right, to our communities. And I think what's really important to think about, as the omnibus bills have passed, as Bill C-51 has passed, and all of these things are changing really fast, is that really at the end of the day, Indigenous rights are the last line of defense. To protect land, to protect humanity, I would offer, to protect all living things. And so it's been a strategy that we've used in doing these court cases. They're really expensive, they cost millions of dollars, and it's not the greatest situation to be in a colonial courtroom, to be perfectly frank. It's a strategy. Sometimes we win, sometimes we don't. But what it does is it forces the Canadian government to look at itself. I had the great opportunity to sit in on the Chilcotin case, and they were amazing lawyers. And I think the thing that I learned from that is seeing Indigenous lawyers being able to speak the oral history within that legal construct, and it was so powerful. And because of Dalgamuk, that oral history is law. And that's a really important thing, going back to that idea about stories and why they're so powerful in Canada and in North America, because they have legal relevance within that Canadian construct. For us, there are laws, right? These things are laws. So, it's been a tool that we've used. We've seen many communities do it. They've had, like, for example, the Shell court challenge that ACFN did. They did a similar thing. They got people all over the globe to sign petitions. They did a series of actions outside the courtrooms. They're in the process of challenging the Grand Rapids pipeline, which is the mega pipeline that hooks up the tar sands to all the infrastructure. Right? So they're trying to challenge that every single way that they can. But it's our way of supporting communities when they assert their rights and title, when they assert their sovereignty and tell these companies that they can't do it. And so the way that works is called, this legal framework is called duty to consult, right? And it's one of the things that we've won within the Supreme Court of Canada over the last 20 years. So if you know anything about Indigenous history in Canada, we weren't able to legally get a lawyer until probably around the 1960s, 70s. So this has been 20, 30 years of legal struggle that has reinforced our rights continually over and over again. It's become a very strong construct. But again, it's a strategy to protect our way of life. And what Missy was talking about, the culture and the well-being of our people, right? So, you know, moving forward, you know, there's 18 First Nations that are in the right of line of Line 9. And so, you know, Chippewas of the Thames has gone ahead with a court case on duty to consult. And what that means is that the Canadian government, in negotiating these leases, right, or saying you can put in this project, you know, and they go through this whole process, right, they have to show due diligence that they've consulted the community. And so that means that the companies, you know, it's not them coming out and like showing us a bunch of charts and a bunch of maps and all these things, because they do. I mean, I've been in Fort Chip when they've done that. They're not in the language, they're not Dene or Cree. They just show up and then they check off a list. We did it. And really what these court cases are about is saying, like, duty consult has to happen. But, you know, there's this other framework that's international, and it's called the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And it talks about in there free and prior informed consent, right? And that has to do with this idea of consultation. And it was a really important thing to happen globally, because there's other countries where Indigenous people don't have rights. They're not recognized. Where here we have treaties, right? And so it's a really, really important thing to say that the companies have to consult these communities. But what free and prior informed consent does is it also talks about the consultation needs to be in our languages, needs to be done in the way that we want it to happen, but it also gives us the right to say no, right? And I think that's why the Canadian government and all of these other governments have been really hesitant to ratify the declaration because of that. But these are the reasons why these court cases are important, because we believe we have the right to say no. And, you know, it's about not just the responsibility of the community to say no, but to say no for all people. And so, again, it's one of these tools that I know Myeengun, who I'll introduce in a minute, will talk about. But like I said, you know, this has been 20 years of work by communities all across Canada to do these different tools. But they are what they are. You know, at the end of the day, we still do actions. You know, you see a lot of blockades, people living on the land, taking it back, and forcing the companies out, right? So there's a variety of different tools that we use in order to protect the land. So our last and final speaker, it's a great privilege that Myeengun's here with us this evening from Chippewas of the Thames. He's a former chief, a former nominee for chief in 2015. And he's a teacher, and he's a practitioner, obviously, as you've seen, speaks the language, does ceremonies, and has that connection. And he's just a really, really well-rounded, connected person to his culture and his way of being. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Myeengun. Thank you.
I have to introduce myself. My name is Myeengun. I come from the Wolf Clan. I also come from Chippewas of the Thames First Nation. It's really not Chippewa, that's not even a word. Chippewa was a word that was somebody interpreted at one point. We're Anishinaabe, we're Ojibwe. When they were saying Ojibwe, they were here in Chippewa, so I guess it sounds the same. So, and I always have that in our community, why we call ourselves what they wrecked, you know, a word. But that's what Indian Affairs had given us, and that's what we're using today. So we're going to do some changes in the next little while. We're going to make some big changes. Our nation, 40 years ago, if I can think back to those days, I was around, they started doing a project in our territories. Aamjiwnaang, Walpo Island, Kettle Point, Stony Point, they're the original treaty signers in Southern Ontario. We're the ones who were family a long time ago. I always have to take us back to a time when our elders talked about our migration story, how we came here, how we came to be in this part of the region. Many years ago, we were all one family. That separated because the Creator said that we had to go find a place that looked that food grew on water. So we had about 7 fires that traveled through this part of the territory, and we looked for those fires and we found them, which led us to the next one. Pockets of families that became elderly stayed in certain areas, and that's where our communities come from originally. So all these nations in the south we're still one family, but at a point at contact when there was a separation by virtue of probably more or less so the Indian Act that said that we have to look at each other from different perspectives, that we weren't connected anymore. And during those times, we found that we were trying to survive. We were trying to find ways to get rid of the oppression, or at least figure out how to continue on with our way of being. And our communities more or less separated. They started looking at themselves as separate entities. They started seeing that we need to survive over here because we're on Lake Huron, over here we're on Lake Erie, over here we're down near the Detroit River. And we started falling into that line. And so when I think back just 40 years ago, while we were in that period of trying to figure out where we need to be, they started building a pipeline. We didn't even know it was happening. It was happening right under Aamjiwnaang's territory, right through their reserve, right through our river where we call Deshkanzibi, the Thames River, right where our pickerel run, right where we gather fish every spring and we eat that fish and we save it and we use it for different things in ceremony. During that time, we didn't realize the devastation that was taking place because, as I said early in the opening, my parents just came out of residential school. They were told that the language and the culture was good for nothing. And they started believing that. They started thinking, maybe we should get out of this way and start moving in the way that we were told was better for us. And we started kind of losing control of our languages and our ceremonies. We didn't even do sweat lodges anymore for that period. It was really important that we had to fit into society because we were forced to do so. That wasn't that long ago, 40 years ago. Our people at that stage probably would have took jobs on the pipeline if they were offered to them, and maybe some of our people did because of the economy and how they had to survive, and if it was a job, they would have took it, especially the labor part. They would have been doing that type of job and didn't even realize what they were actually doing. As we go through now, a few years later, our people started recovering. And we're not all totally recovered yet, but we're still remembering some of the stories that our grandparents told us as we sat in their living rooms, and they told us some things that was really, really delicate and really important for us to know. I remember myself listening to my grandfather, who became probably, it's in two hands. He joined the Christian community, and he was very proud of that lifestyle that he did. And then when I look back at him now, I probably wouldn't have got to know him if he wouldn't have done that, because he had a very dangerous lifestyle previous to that. He was a very, very mean person. And then when he found a way to balance that out, it added probably 25 years onto his life. In those 25 years, I was able to meet him. So I look at it from that perspective. He did his best, and I would sit in the living room with him for hours and hours and hours, and he would tell me a lot of stories about the Bible. He would tell me a lot of stories that he learned. But every now and then he would fall out of that little way of thinking, and he would go back into the culture. For maybe about 20 minutes, he'll tell me an Aamjiwnaang story. I remember one time he took me outside and showed me medicines that were out in the backyard that he said he used, and that was the only thing he had for medicine. And he showed me these medicines, and then I could see him slipping back into his Christianity way. And then we would go back into the house and we would sit for another 6 hours, and I'd hear more Bible stories, which was fine. But then he would come out of it again for a while, and he would tell me some of the language. And I would just wait for those 20-minute periods to listen to his stories, because I was getting an education that I don't even know if he was aware he was giving me, and I didn't even know at the time. But during that time, we know that our nation was similar to that. Our nation was learning, trying to find a way to learn and grasp at those stories of our elders. During that time, a lot of progress, I guess what they consider progress, took place in Southern Ontario. A lot of building, a lot of London got built up pretty large. They built a dam in London along the Thames River, which flooded our rivers during the springtime, so we couldn't even get to the river to fish anymore. We had a residential school right on my First Nation, Mount Elgin Residential School. My parents went there, and it was there for about 100 years. They called it the mush hole also. Same thing with Brantford. I guess that's what they fed their students, mush every day, and that's all they had to eat. But during that time, we started thinking about our future, and there was a group of people from our community who went back in the bush and they practiced the sweat lodges. They even practiced our language. They practiced some of the ceremonies that we did. We did shaking tent ceremonies. We did, ceremonies that you probably haven't even heard of, but we were still practicing them. But they would be incarcerated if they ever got caught doing that. So they went back in the bush and they practiced those ceremonies. And I got to know some of these people who passed this knowledge on, and I got very acquainted with some of the elders, and I started realizing that there was something that I wasn't learning. And I noticed my whole community was really not learning these things because a lot of them weren't, they felt a little uncomfortable around these people that were practicing ceremonies, but some of them were. And we started forming a little bit of a stronger group within our community, and we started finding people who kept this knowledge alive, and we started looking for them. And as the elders would pass away, we would really challenge ourselves to go see the other elders who still had this knowledge. And from that point on, 40 years ago, we're seeing a huge gain in the knowledge that was meant to be taken away from us during those schools. And so we started thinking about how our role in our communities and in this world related to the environmental hazards that we've seen happening. It was only a few years ago when we really took this Line 9 by our hands and started looking at it and saying, what is this and why are they doing this to our community? Why are they running oil through our territory? In fact, they took all of our oil before in the mid-70s, they started cross-drilling right on the edges of our reserve, and those cross-drills came in and took all the oil deposits that were under our reserve. Because they were talking about it in them days. What are they going to do if there's oil back there? And after we started seeing that there was something more to it, we started getting our community together. We started having little community sharing circles and started talking about this, what was going on. So it was a few years ago we started seeing that there's something needs to be done in our territory. Something needs to be addressed, because if we let it go, we won't see any more pickerel in our river. We won't see any more medicines that are growing. We won't see any more of these things that we considered very important to our upbringing and our culture. And those stories my grandfather told me were just myths from that point on if we don't take care of it anymore. So a lot of the people started thinking, this is what I need to do. We need to study this and find out what this is all about. And so we did. We started looking. And then over time, we decided that there was something we needed to do. It wasn't that long ago when we found out that the company who ran the pipeline through our territory was contemplating running a different type of oil through this territory. It wasn't the light crude that they talked about, which was been running through that line for a number of 40 years or so. It was a very dangerous type of oil that they're considering moving through. And our community got very concerned. They said, I don't know, if that's really what we want to see happen underneath the Thames River or the Grand River or any of the rivers and lakes that are in our region. So we started thinking, what do we do? We started meeting. And our meetings took place very small at the start, and they started growing. People started talking about this Line 9 that was traveling through. Nobody really knew what it was, but we started learning about it. And we started telling ourselves that we have a very important responsibility to this environment, to this world that we all share, we all live in. We said that we're the protectors, and we always have been the protectors of this land. We've always been and always will be the protectors of our Mother, the Earth. Our Mother Earth, she took us into this world as babies, and she let us feed from her. She let us drink her water. She gave us all the medicines that we needed to survive. As we travel through life, she takes care of us just like a mother would any child. And then when it's our turn to go back to Creator's world, she'll even take us back at that point. She takes us back into her. And we go back to Creator's world. So after understanding this, we said there's something we need to do. As the Anishinaabe Nation in Southern Ontario, we don't want tar sands oil traveling through our nation. We don't want this to happen because we know the devastation that's going to take place. And we're worried. We got very worried. We're definitely going to take this to the highest level that we can. It wasn't that long ago when we took a strategy position. We understand the courts system isn't the best route. You don't win all the time in courts, as we heard earlier. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. It's a chance, it's a gamble. And that's something that we didn't even really want to go. So what we thought we would do as people of our nation, we thought we would sit and talk with Enbridge face to face. We decided that, why don't we go and find out who they are? Why don't we go find out what they're about? Why don't we find out if they would listen to our type of reason? And so last December, myself as appointed by our band council and my chief, Joe Muskokaman, we set up some meetings with Enbridge in Calgary. We said that we would come and visit you, and we would share some of our important role here that is very, very important. In our first meeting that we had with Enbridge, I'm going to walk over here and our first meeting that we had with Enbridge on December of last year, before we even spoke about anything, we brought out the two-row wampum. We had this wampum and we talked about the story about it. We said that you know, this is a very important relationship that we have with the newcomers in the land, and that we would even share the resources, and that's what took place in this wampum belt, that the resources in the land are very important for everybody. Nobody owns what's underneath our Mother Earth. It belongs to everybody. It's everybody's opportunity to share and have that ability to do this. So we took this wampum belt and we told them the story about how we understood it. And the vice president of their company, Renee Benoit, I handed it to her just like this. And I asked her if she would accept this wampum belt and all the responsibilities that went along with it. She smiled and she gladly accepted. She thought it was the best thing that ever happened. And she took that wampum belt and she was so proud of that. She was so honored to have that. And I said, you know the story now. Yeah. You understand that wampum belt talks about us sharing resources, that we would protect our Mother Earth and we would keep this as pure as possible. And she really accepted that, and everybody in Enbridge was so happy to have that. So they have it in their possession right now. And every meeting that we had, we asked them to bring it. And we brought our wampum belts too and put them on the table before we talked, because that's the foundation of how we were going to proceed in any talk with Enbridge. So the next meeting came, and they almost forgot it. They had to run back to their office and pick it up. But we weren't going to start the meeting until they did. So they ran back to their office and they brought it. And they brought us a gift. And me and the chief were sitting there. Me and the chief were sitting there, and we had another representative from our council. And one of the representatives from Enbridge came up and he said, "We brought you something. We brought you something." And it was so sincere, you know, how they looked in their face, that they brought these little, I guess, glass, I guess, protectors. And inside that little thing, there was a circle in there. There was a ring. And this little ring, I wasn't sure what it was. I just thought, wow, you know, they're being real nice here. They said that this ring that we're going to give you was made out of the pipe that burst in Marshall, Michigan. We stood back and we said, I can't believe what you're doing. Like, the devastation that pipeline did. And you're treating it like gold and you're giving it to us. We gave you a wampum belt. You give us a piece of pipe that devastated the land. We're sitting there thinking, I don't know where this is going to go, but they're not hearing something. We were like just in shock. We're sitting here thinking, you know, if they call that an honor, we're in trouble here. We're just, it's not going to go anywhere. So as our conversations took place over the course of December till, well, we made an agreement with them that they wouldn't start that pipeline until we would have a speaking portion from January right till May 31st. And during that time, we agreed that they wouldn't start that line if they wouldn't ask for leave to open because they would give us that time to speak with them. So as our meetings progressed, well, deprogressed or whatever it could have been, they wanted to talk, very, very much so, but nothing about environment. They want to talk about the future solar panel projects and wind farms and future, you know, business development. So we sat through probably 2 or 3 meetings, keep telling them, we have to get on the subject. We have to get back to the reason that we're here. Our community told us to come here to protect our environment, and we need to talk to you about that. So we would bring that up, and they would bring their heavy speakers in, and they would kind of drown us out during those conversations. And then the third meeting, I think it was in end of February, maybe early April, February. But anyway, we finally stood up. We said, okay, we heard enough of this. Let's talk about something that's important here. Let's talk about our environmental protection. Let's talk about our role. Let's talk about, you've had that line in this territory for 40 years. Never once had you even offered to give any of the nations in Southern Ontario 1 cent, but you gave every municipality tax dollars for everywhere that line went through. So let's talk about historical payments. I think you owe us something. And then we started saying, how long do you expect to have that line in there? And how long do you expect to be making billions of dollars? So let's talk about revenue sharing. Let's talk about sharing some of those resources with the communities that need it. You know, we know our communities here in Southern Ontario and all across Canada, a lot of the poverty that exists here exists on First Nation territories. When you have huge, huge companies like Enbridge and diamond mines up north and all these different timber companies making money on their traditional territory without giving them even 1 cent. We started talking this way and they shut up. They wouldn't listen anymore. They were saying, well, let's get back to the future development and see if we can do it. No, I said, let's get back to the reason that we're here. And we stood up and we said, well, if you don't want to talk about these issues, then what are we going to talk about? And it got quiet. So I said, and my chief said, I guess there's nothing more to talk about. I said, you want us to stop our litigation against you. You've asked us very plain, right to our face, will you guys drop your litigation? We said, no, we're not going to drop that. You know, that's our balance. That's what we need to have here in order to make this work. And they kept every now and then nudging us to try to, okay, we'll do this, but can you please drop that lawsuit? I said, no, never going to happen. So the last meeting that we had kind of went that way. We just kind of ended the meeting rather abruptly. And we ended up going back home, and about 2 weeks later we get a call from them. You guys want to resume conversation? I said, well, we'll talk. There's nothing wrong with talking. We will talk. Don't ever think that we won't. You know, we didn't leave that meeting because nobody agreed to anything. We didn't have an opportunity to do that because you kept running the agenda. And so we said we would always talk. Don't ever feel uncomfortable about calling us. So they did. And they wanted to meet us in Toronto about some of their future projects that they were thinking about doing. And we said, well, when we go there, we're going to talk about those items that we were talking about. And they said, no, we're going to talk about this. I said, well, we hung up. We just said, okay. I guess that's the end of the conversation. So we pushed really, really hard to get our hearing date pushed up as fast as we could, because we feel like if it would have lingered on past May 31st, then we run into a little of a gap there where they can apply for leave to open. So May 31st came along and I was very concerned, so I went to my counsel and I said, we got to do something because there's going to be a gap here before our court date. We have 16 days, you know, and they could probably apply for leave to open during that time. And we always felt that if the oil was flowing, it might be a little bit, you know, detrimental to our case because it's already flowing, and the judge will look at it like, well, it's already flowing and they've satisfied all the requirements. So we wanted to get it going, or at least do something. So I asked my counsel if we could apply for injunction. I said, we got to do something. We got to stop them from at least doing it, at least till the court date anyway. And our counsel still was very, they said, why don't we try something? Why don't we ask the National Energy Board for a stay? It's not as harsh as an injunction. It's asking them to do the right thing because the court hasn't been heard, and you have the right to ask for leave to open. But a stay is kind of like a mutual ground. We will give them a chance to do that. So we applied for a stay to the National Energy Board. The Enbridge came back with a response, and it was denied from the National Energy Board. So I went to Mississauga's New Credit, who are also kind of cousins to ours, and asked them and told them what we were doing. I said that we'd still like to stop this if there's a way that, you know, maybe we can simultaneously or right after each other impose an injunction so we can stop this. So that's our role right now. Is we've got Mississauga's New Credit very interested in doing that right now. We're gonna apply for an injunction as soon as we can to see if we can stop this, and then when that injunction runs out, we hope that Mississauga's New Credit will do it, and it'll go all the way up to the Mohawk community. So, you know, tomorrow's a very important day. Tomorrow's the day that we identified to meet in court. We don't know how the judge is going to think or how they're going to work this out, but it doesn't matter because regardless of what the judge says in this, we're not going to stop fighting. We're going to keep fighting against this line, and we're going to do everything we can to stop it. I just have to look at my dad, my grandfather, my grandson. Why are we doing this? Because we want our responsibility to be the strongest point of this whole reason, not really what a court says. Like, as you mentioned, courts sometimes do things and nobody wins, but I don't care about that. As long as my grandchildren win, as long as your grandchildren win, and they have clean air, and they don't have to worry about the water being polluted, they don't have to worry about the pickerel being poisoned, or anything that comes along with those stupid pipelines that are in the ground right now. I really feel very passionate that regardless of what happens tomorrow, I want you to know that in this chain that you talked about, you might not know it, but it's the original people and the newcomers that came to the land, and he tied that string between their arms, and they said, if you ever need your help, all you have to do is move it, and we'll come and help you. And the same thing with the other side. You're seeing it happen today with you, brothers and sisters here. We asked for your help, and you guys came along, and you guys are helping us with everything we need to do. So I want to thank you. We're going to continue on with this fight. We're going to battle it out. I've been nominated for chief of my community, which will be July 18th is our election date. If I win, if I don't, that's okay. But I'm still going to fight for our Mother the Earth for the rest of my life, no matter what I do. And now when I pray to our Creator, our brothers and sisters here, as I mentioned earlier, when they separated us, they told us that we have to be separated, but the Haudenosaunee community, the Anishinaabe community, thought about this a long time ago. They have a road of peace between our nations. We're going to see this come true. We're going to band together with all nations here in Canada, North America, the world, to make sure that our environment stays. And we have this recorded. This is a part of our history. This is a part that you never heard about in your high schools. So as I'm teaching at Conestoga College now, third year in the criminal justice course, because we do have 25% of the total population in Canada, population is Aboriginal, the ones that are in prison. That's ridiculous. You know, last week or 2 weeks ago, when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendations came out, and they were asking the government of Canada if they would launch an inquiry to murdered and missing Aboriginal women. Who's the only one that didn't stand up in that whole room? Was the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs. I thought that was just like the most ridiculous thing I ever seen in my life. It tells you what this government, how they care about Aboriginal issues and really about people. Because I don't think our best bet is to negotiate with even governments anymore, or corporations. Let's talk to the people on the floor. Let's talk to us. And I'm going to tell that judge tomorrow. Yes. I'm going to tell him, like, this is your system. We had been pushed to come to your system to protect your constitution, but don't forget, the original people of this land are still here, and we're not going to go anywhere either. So you got to start listening to us too, and we're growing. 6-to-1 to mainstream society right now. Aboriginal populations are growing. So we're going to take this, and we're going to continue on with this battle. And all you brothers and sisters out there, we appreciate what you've done. Chippewas asked for a call to support. You came through like crazy. I think we raised about $6,000 in our petition online right now. Total, and more. We have over 1,500 names on the petition right now. So I really want to thank you guys for listening to us and supporting us. And if you can show up tomorrow and make some noise outside so that judge can hear, we would really appreciate it. So I want to thank you very much for...
For tomorrow, yeah? So just some quick announcements. We're going to hand out the buttons. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to do question and answer. We're kind of at time. But I just wanted to acknowledge, again, Rising Tide, the Friends House, the Peace in Action Coalition, for helping sponsor this event. And really heartfelt thanks for doing that. For more information, there's a petition on Lead Now. If you do social media, you can sign the petition. Please post that and send it out to your friends. We have a donation jar at the front here. If you want to support the court costs, please feel more than welcome. I don't know if Lynn's here from West End Against Line 9. Yeah. So Lynn is also helping doing some fundraising and doing some organizing locally. So if you want more information, please see her after.
Just on that note, I have a sign-up sheet for the fundraiser that we're doing for the court challenge. So if anybody wants help specifically on that fundraiser, just see Lynn or I when you're on your way out, and it's just a one-time event that would be very helpful. Thank you.
I also just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge Crystal. I don't know if she's still in here, sitting in the back. But Crystal's been fasting to help support the court challenge, and I think that's really important. Again, we started this off with prayer, and those are the things that we do because we care, and because we love the land and we love our way of life. You know, it's not
until the end of tomorrow. That'd be great.
would answer, but I think the group can help you.
Yes.
So we're going to finish off with a close. I want to again invite Dakota to come up and to close us out for the evening. So if you could just stay for a few more minutes and we'll do this properly. Thank you.